Imagine for a moment that within you resides an unfathomable force, a power so vast it defies human comprehension. A divine being, older than time itself, that guides your thoughts, controls your emotions, and shapes your destiny without you knowing it. The mystery of the universe, the enigma of existence, is not something distant or unreachable. It is something that resides deep within your being. In The God That Resides in You, Prentice Mulford invites us to awaken to this hidden reality, to a forgotten knowledge, to a truth as old as humanity itself. Throughout these pages, you will discover that the force that moves around you is not external to you, but emanates from within, from the most sacred and profound part of your soul. What if I told you that you hold in your hands the key to transform your life, to master the invisible laws that govern nature and human destiny? This is no ordinary text. It is a gateway, a call that resonates in the hearts of those who seek something beyond the tangible reality, those who seek purpose, a connection with the divine. Prepare your mind, for you are about to embark on a journey that will challenge your view of life, invite you to recognize your true power, and reveal the God that has always been within you. This is the beginning of a transformation that will not only change your present, but will lead you to uncover the deepest secrets of the universe and of your being. The adventure begins now. As a spiritual being, you embody a divine spark within the vastness of God, an eternal force, a benevolent spirit. As such, you represent a power in constant evolution, incapable of decline and destined for perpetual growth. Through the ages, your essence has progressed tirelessly, nourished by my love, fueling your intelligence to its current mental heights. The power of your mind has sharpened in quality and clarity across many physical lives, far beyond the one you are living now. With each past existence, you have unconsciously strengthened your power. Every mental battle has a purpose: overcoming pain, mastering desires, perfecting skills, progressing in the arts or vocations, and confronting errors and unsatisfactory flaws. These struggles are spiritual impulses guiding you toward greater power and a deeper realization of your being. With this realization comes happiness, for the ultimate goal of life is to attain bliss. Right now, you embody an expanded version of yourself, possessing all the desired mental qualities, reaching unexplored heights. The dissatisfaction you feel toward your imperfections is proof of this. If your mind were not so perceptive, these flaws would remain unnoticed. You are no longer in the self-satisfaction of the past, where you once saw yourself as perfect. Now, as you examine yourself, you recognize that you may have swung too far in the opposite direction. Your eyes have suddenly opened to your imperfections, and it seems as though they are multiplying. But is this not the manifestation of the God residing within you? The relentless growth of this power creates a feeling of imperfection, even though this sense of incompleteness is closer than ever to being resolved. The greatest proof lies in your current ability to perceive what you had never noticed in yourself before. Perhaps there are gaps in your mental structure where harmful elements fester, but before their discovery, your situation was far worse. Though revelation may be unsettling, you can now be certain that these flaws will be corrected. There may be voids in your mental framework where undesirable forces take root, but recognizing them should not discourage you. It is useless to say, "I am so imperfect that I will never be able to fix all my mistakes." Now you have the power to correct them. Every protest of your mind against your flaws is a forward push of the spirit. You must simply not expect to fix everything in an hour, a day, a week, or even a year. There will never come a time in your future when you are unaware of areas in which you need improvement. If you see the possibility of growth, you must, of course, first recognize the flaw that needs to change. In other words, envision an even greater outcome, a more refined development, a more delicate shade of character, and a more intricate distribution of strength constantly reaching you. When you realize this, you will stop worrying about being an imperfect creature, because you will understand that you are in the process of building one of God's temples, ever more magnificent. No talent ever ceases to grow. It is like a tree that continues to develop even in winter. If you learn to paint, draw, perform, speak publicly, or do anything, and then stop practicing for a month, a year, or two, upon returning to it, you will find that your talent has increased, that new ideas have emerged, and that your ability to execute has improved. You may wonder, what is the purpose of life? In a sense, you cannot direct your own life entirely, There is a destiny guiding it, a law governing it, leading you toward an ever-expanding and limitless capacity for happiness. As your power grows, you cannot stop evolving, no matter the appearances. The pain you have suffered comes from this very growth of the spirit, pushing you ever more forcefully against what causes you misery. Ultimately, you must see this pain as proof that you are on the wrong path, from which you must exit as quickly as possible. And when you cry out sincerely to know the right path, guidance will always come, for it is a law of nature that every genuine request is answered, and a sincere prayer for anything always brings the necessary provision. What is the purpose of life? To derive the greatest happiness from it, to learn to live in such a way that each day is anticipated with confidence that it will be just as full of joy, or even more so, than the present day. To banish even the thought that time can slip away from us, to be grateful for life, to rise above illness or pain, to command the body with the power of the mind so that it feels no suffering, to control and direct thought so that power continually increases, enabling it to work and act independently of the body, providing us with everything we need, whether it be food, clothing, or sustenance, without theft or injustice toward anyone. To cultivate the power so that the mind constantly restores, strengthens, and rejuvenates the body through its use, preventing any part or function from weakening, withering, or deteriorating. To continually discover new sources of joy, both for ourselves and others, bringing happiness and usefulness, so that our presence is always welcome. To be no one's enemy, but everyone's friend. This is the destiny of life in these realms of existence, where beings as real as we are, perhaps even more alive than us, have learned and continue to learn how to extract the greatest fulfillment from life. This is the inevitable fate of every individual spirit. You cannot escape ultimate and everlasting happiness as you continue to grow in this life and beyond. All the pain you have endured was like the nudges and pushes keeping you away from harmful paths, guiding you toward alignment with universal law. As you develop greater sensitivity, you will more clearly understand the law that steers you away from pain and leads you toward ever-expanding happiness. You will reach a state of mind where life itself becomes an ecstasy. In this state, all notion of time disappears, just as it does when we are immersed in something that excites or amuses us, like watching a thrilling play or performance. Thus, as the scriptures say, "A day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day." The nirvana of the Hindus suggests all the possibilities of life that unfold upon our world. My sister implies that calmness, serenity, and confidence of the mind that stem from the absolute certainty that every effort we make, every endeavor we undertake, must succeed, and that the happiness we experience at this moment is only a stepping stone toward even greater joy to come. If you had the feeling that the journey abroad you so eagerly desire was about to materialize, just as surely as you know the sun rose this morning, then of course you would feel no anxiety. In our perfected lives we will fully understand this, for we will have absolute certainty that when we direct our mental strength and thoughts toward a goal, a pursuit, or a project, we activate the powerful force of attraction within the substance of thought. In doing so, we draw to ourselves the resources, opportunities, forces, or people necessary to carry out that plan. You scarcely worry whether your telegram will reach its destination, for even if you know little about electricity, you are aware that when applied in a certain way, it will transmit your message. You will have the same confidence in knowing that when your thought is attuned and directed in a specific manner, it will accomplish what you desire. Before people knew how to harness electricity, it existed in the same measure and with the same power as today. However, in terms of human interaction, it was virtually useless as a means of communication, simply because we lacked the knowledge to direct it. Similarly, the immense power of human thought is currently in a comparable situation. It is wasted because we do not know how to focus and direct it. Worse still, due to ignorance and lifelong habits, we misuse our mental energy in the wrong direction, sending out rays charged with ill will, envy, complaints, contempt, or any form of negativity. All of this is a reality, misapplied and misused, which can strike and harm others, and inevitably ourselves. Here lies the key to every successful effort in this existence or any other. Never acknowledge impossibility in your thinking. Never reject or dismiss what may seem like the wildest idea, for in doing so, you may unknowingly close the door to unforeseen opportunities. To declare something impossible simply because it appears so to you is merely training yourself into the bad habit of shouting impossible at every new idea. Your mind then becomes a prison filled with closed doors to everything outside, and you are its only prisoner. Everything is possible with God. God works in and through you. To say impossible regarding what you can do or become is almost a sin. It is denying God's power to act through you, denying the infinite mind's ability to work beyond your current understanding. Saying impossible means setting your own limited comprehension as the standard for the universe. That is quite bold, like trying to measure infinite space with a simple ruler. When you say impossible or I can't, you yourself create an impossibility. That thought is the greatest obstacle to what is truly possible. Yet you cannot stop it, for it will push you forward, no matter how much you resist. There can be no successful resistance against the constant and eternal improvement of all things. You should say, "It is possible for me to become anything I admire." You should say, "It is possible for me to become a writer, a speaker, an actor, or an artist." By doing so, you will open the door to your own inner temple of art. When you said impossible, you kept it shut. Saying I can't was the iron lock that barred this door against you, but saying I can is the force that will push that lock open. The mind or thought of Christ had the power to command the elements and calm the storm. Your mind, as part of the great whole, contains the seed waiting to bear fruit. The same power, by concentrating the invisible substance of thought, was able to transform that invisible element into materialized food, loaves and fish. This is a power inherent in every mind, and every mind is growing toward this power. Today you see a healthy child unable to lift a small weight, yet you know that within that weak child lie the abilities and potential that, in 20 years, will enable him to lift any load with ease. In the same way, the higher power, the spiritual power to come, can be predicted for us, who are currently mere spiritual infants. The reason life is so unhappy in this realm of existence is that, not knowing the law, we go against it, and thus we experience its pains rather than its joys. The law cannot be fully learned from the past records or experiences of anyone, no matter how much power they have attained. These records or lives may be very useful and suggestive to us. However, although there are general principles that apply to all, there are also individual laws that pertain to each separate and individualized person. You cannot directly follow my path to become happier, nor can I follow yours, for each of us is formed by a unique combination of elements. These components have shaped our minds, our true selves, through the ages of growth and evolution. You must study and discover for yourself what your nature requires to bring you lasting happiness. You are a book unto yourself. You must open this book, page by page, chapter by chapter, as they come to you through the experiences of each day, month, and year, and read them. No one else can read them for you as you can. No one else can think exactly as you do, feel exactly as you do, or be affected in the same way as you by the forces or people around you. And for that very reason, no one else can judge what you truly need to make your life more complete, perfect, and happy. Only you know how to do it. You must discover for yourself which relationships are best for you, which foods, which methods in any field, business, art, or profession yield the best results for you. It can be very useful to consult with others who share similar interests, as the advice of those with greater knowledge of general laws can provide strength, courage, or new ideas to help you accomplish your goals. Meeting from time to time with serious, sincere, and honest individuals who also have a clear purpose, and discussing with them, and they with you, can be beneficial. However, when you accept any man or woman as an infallible guide or authority and follow exactly what they say, you stray from the main path. By relying on another person's experiences, which are based on a specific combination of elements or chemical substances, you adopt their results as the standard for your own unique combination of elements, even though your combination may be very different and may react differently to external influences. Your physical body contains copper, magnesium, phosphorus, and other minerals and chemical substances, combinations and recombinations of elements that earthly science has yet to fully explore. Similarly, your mind or thought contains invisible or spiritual correspondences of these minerals, even finer and more subtle. All these components are combined in a unique way and in different proportions from any other physical or spiritual being. So how could anyone else fully understand the specific action of this individual combination better than you? There are general laws, but each individual must apply the general law to themselves. It is a general law that the wind propels a boat, but not every boat uses the air in exactly the same way. It is a general law that thought is a force and can produce results, constantly affecting other people at a distance from our bodies. The quality of our thought and its power to influence outcomes largely depends on our relationships. For this reason, if your thought is superior or represents a higher power, and you see that through its use you are advancing in the world, you should not let others dictate your character or way of living. Others may test your methods as experiments, but you must remember that they are only experiments. You must avoid the common mistake of blindly copying and idolizing another person. The Christ of Nazareth once asked some of his disciples not to worship him. "Do not call me good," he said, "for no one is good except God." Christ said, "I am the way and the life," meaning, as I understand the text, that regarding certain general laws he was aware of and governed himself by as a spirit, he knew he could provide certain knowledge. However, he never claimed that his individual life, with all the human struggles and experiences he had endured, should be strictly replicated. If I pray to the infinite spirit of goodness, asking for more strength and deliverance from fear and sin when my mind trembles at the thought of crucifixion, I humbly acknowledge that, as a powerful spirit that I am, I still need the help of other spirits who are fully aware of this reality. I refuse to present myself before my disciples as God or the infinite. Rather, I encourage them to direct their devotion towards that omnipotent, eternal, and incomprehensible power from which all good emanates, and which can be accessed through prayer and the desires of the human spirit, and to worship only God, the eternal and unfathomable power, ever moving through the limitless universe, a power that no man has ever seen nor ever will see, except when observing its various expressions in the sun, the stars, the clouds, the wind, the birds, the beasts, the flowers, the animals, or in man himself, as a future angel or archangel, ascending to ever higher levels of consciousness and power, yet always oriented toward the source from which he draws his strength. Never should he worship a mere form of that expression, thereby making the creature greater than the Creator. This power is currently active and manifests through every man, woman, and child on this planet. Or, to use the biblical expression, it is God working in us and through us. We are all parts of the infinite power, a power that constantly elevates us to higher, subtler, and happier levels of existence. Every man or woman, regardless of their condition or level of intellect, is a stronger and better being than they were before, despite all apparent contradictions that may arise. The desire in human nature, and in all forms of nature or spirit expressed through matter, is to become increasingly refined. Up to a certain point of spiritual growth, this desire remains unconscious. The desire of God operates even in the most degraded drunkard who indulges in excess. The spirit of that man wishes to escape his condition and works, however weakly, to make him understand that truth is preferable. It also works in people you might consider despicable, for when Jesus was asked how many times one should forgive another's offenses, his response indicated that there should be no limit to the number of times a man or woman should forgive another's mistakes or weaknesses. There should be no limit to the kindness and understanding we extend toward a person who frequently falls or struggles with an unhealthy appetite. It is a great wrong that we often unconsciously commit when we say or think of someone with anger issues. It's useless to do anything for them, because when we say this, we project into the atmosphere a thought of despair and discouragement. That person will feel this thought as an obstacle slowing their progress in overcoming the difficult situation they are in. In the same way, the similar thought of another person has affected us in our own efforts to rise from the difficult situations we were or still are immersed in, whether it be the swamp of indecision, the swamp of discouragement, the swamp of bad temper, or the swamp of envious and hateful thinking. However, the human spirit becomes stronger by fighting against whatever it struggles with. It strengthens itself by confronting its own critical and unkind thoughts. Eventually, it leads a man or woman to a point where they can say to others through their thoughts, "I would prefer to have your approval rather than your censure, but I do not depend on your approval or censure, For my harshest judge, my surest punishment for any wrongdoing I commit, comes from my own thoughts. The God or goddess residing within us, whose judgment and dissatisfaction allow no escape, nonetheless becomes increasingly merciful toward its own mistakes as the spirit gains a clearer vision. It understands that in some way, as we evolve from a coarser expression to a finer one, there must be errors to struggle against and ultimately triumph over. Every man or woman is predestined to a certain number of faults until the spirit overcomes them, and it must do so, for the nature of the spirit is to fight against faults. The only thing impossible for man is to remove this quality from his own spirit, the quality of always striving toward greater power and happiness. If you use this as an excuse to sin, to indulge in excess, to lie, steal, or murder, saying that you cannot help it, that you are predestined to it, then you will be punished just the same. Perhaps not by human law, but by the natural or divine law, which has its own punishments for every possible sin, whether it be murder, lust, lying, theft, malicious thought, or gluttony. And these punishments are constantly being inflicted, and today thousands upon thousands suffer from the sins they commit in ignorance of the law of life. The burden of the preacher's song has been punishment, punishment, punishment. Humanity must forget punishment, for it must be guided and drawn toward greater goodness, purity, and refinement by the increasingly greater pleasures we experience as we refine ourselves. The warning of punishment was necessary when humanity was more cruel. It could only be reached through punishment. The race was blind, and due to its condition, it had to be kept on the right path through a series of painful whiplashes. But now that we are beginning to see more clearly, just like the most awakened and sensitive among our race, we no longer need punishment, just as you no longer need a man with a club to persuade you to go somewhere. The healing and renewing force of spring affects your body in its growth and changes under the same laws and elements that govern growth in all other organized organisms, such as trees, plants, birds, and animals. At the beginning of spring each year, a force from the sun reaches this planet and affects all forms of organized life. Since man is the highest, most complex, and most powerful mental organism on the planet, he absorbs the greatest portion of this force, and in the future he will absorb even more, gaining even greater benefits as he learns to place himself in the optimal states to receive it. Material science calls it heat, but the quality known as heat is only its outer or physical manifestation. The heat of the sun only becomes heat once it reaches our planet and interacts with the elements of the Earth. A few miles above the Earth's surface, heat is scarce or non-existent. If this force were to manifest as heat when the sun rises or passes overhead, the air on mountaintops would be as warm as in the valleys. As we know, on the highest peaks, snow and ice are perpetual because, at such altitudes, the sun's force is not sufficiently mixed with the elements of the earth to convert it into heat as it is felt in the valleys and plains. This force causes the increased movement and circulation of sap in trees, which begin their cycle of life when the sun of the new year acts upon them. The sap is new life for the tree, from which its buds, flowers, and fruits are born. This invisible force from the sun also gives the tree the power to draw new nutrients from the soil through its roots. It helps it shed the dead leaves that remained from the previous year's harvest, which have persisted throughout the winter, as can be seen in forests of oaks and walnut trees. This force also acts during the last months of winter and the early months of spring on animals and birds, especially if they are in their wild or natural state, urging them to shed their coats of fur or feathers. However, this release of old visible matter is only a relatively small part of the change occurring within them. There is also an expulsion or rejection of old invisible matter throughout the body of the bird or animal, through the pores or other channels in various forms, some visible, others invisible. This expulsion is followed by the incorporation of new elements inside, while new fur, plumage, or hair grows on the outside. Your body is governed by the same law. During the last months of winter and the early months of spring, you experience a renewal, shedding old dead matter to make way for the new. If you allow this force to act in you in the best possible way, you will learn to rest and relax mentally or physically when needed, just as birds and other animals do during their renewal period, discarding old matter and receiving the new. The force you are receiving at this moment, just like them, is invisible to the physical eye because it is a form of energy. The new coat, feathers, skin, and internal and external tissues of your body, just like the new buds, leaves, and branches, are tangible manifestations of this force. They are crystallizations emerging from an invisible solution of chemical substances in which the bird, the tree, and your own body are immersed. Everything that was absorbed from the previous year or the elements present in this solution has been exhausted. The tree, or any other visible organism, the bird, or your body, is in the same relationship with this solution as a metal deposit in a mineral solution, attracting the crystallizations that form within it. There is no great boundary between what we call matter and spirit. Matter is nothing more than a form of spirit or thought, perceived by the physical eye. Matter is force temporarily materialized, like a piece of coal which, when ignited, releases the force bound to it to power an engine. Then that piece largely becomes invisible, transforming into unseen elements, as in our atmosphere. Force constantly shifts from physical visibility to invisibility and vice versa. Millions upon millions of tons of invisible matter may float above our heads for an hour, only to fall the next day as rain or snow, then be carried upward again. Though these forces are invisible, the most perfect crystals of mineral elements come from the calmest solution. Your body is governed by the same law during this springtime renovation and recrystallization of its elements. To gain the maximum benefit from the warming and renewing element of spring, you should rest whenever you feel the need, whether during the day or at night. If you keep your body and mind in opposition to their inclination, you force your muscles through sheer willpower. If you work with your mind or body until total exhaustion, unaware of how drained you are, as thousands of people do and are forced to do, then you prevent this healing and regenerative power from fully acting within your body. You prevent the new element that renews the tree and makes its buds bloom from assimilating into your body. You cling to worn-out elements that should be discarded, just as the oak tree loses all its dead leaves before the end of winter. You carry this dead element, a lifeless burden, with you instead of embracing the new higher life. This, among other reasons, is what weakens people, turns their hair white and wrinkles their faces. The decline of the physical body, which we call aging, is entirely due to the fact that man does not believe or does not know that he can place himself in the right conditions to receive a constant supply of force that would clothe the spirit with new material. Sheer muscular strength and constant physical activity are not always signs of perfect health. During a fever, a normally weak man may need the support of 2 or 3 people to stand, yet once the fever has passed, he finds himself as weak as a child, though typically, once the crisis is over, he is considered out of danger. Similarly, in business, in the intense and almost fierce competition of commerce, thousands of people live a feverish and excited life, always under tension, requiring themselves to stay in that state. They cannot work unless they are in a certain state of tension. Sometimes, due to the demands of their own nature, their nerves relax and they feel lethargic. They mistake this friendly signal for a form of illness and decide to treat it as such. Even in such situations, when they are forced to stay in bed for weeks or months and are cared for as if they had a serious illness, believing in its severity, they sometimes emerge at the end in a better and stronger state than before. Why does this happen? Because through the forced interruption of physical or mental activity, nature itself works, just as it would in unfavorable circumstances, to rebuild a worn-out body. As a result, the person recovers with new vitality in their bones, muscles, and nerves, because nature has been able to take advantage of this period of rest and calm to carry out the necessary repairs. If you simply consider this idea of the regenerative force of spring, even if you cannot fully believe it at first, you will receive great help by reflecting on it with respect. For if you do not drive out a living truth from your mind when it first presents itself, it will take root and live within you, and it will prove to be of great benefit to you. Men, due to constant physical exertion, wear themselves out far more quickly than is generally believed. The robustness of a strong sailor typically lasts only a few years, and often he is an old man by the age of 45. The hard-working farmer, who toils all year from dawn to dusk and believes that labor is the greatest virtue in the world, often becomes a mass of bones and rheumatism by the age of 50. The average lifespan of hard laborers is much shorter than that of those in professions requiring less physical effort, who work hard but do not exhaust themselves hour after hour. When the body is truly exhausted, as I observed in the mines of California, where I spent years working with a pickaxe alongside teams of men lifting, moving, and struggling, I noticed that the last 3 hours of a 10 or even 12-hour workday were carried out with much less enthusiasm than the previous hours. In fact, it was often just the appearance of work, unless the vigilant eye of the foreman was constantly on the men. Why? Because they were no longer physically capable of working. It was only sheer willpower that forced their muscles to continue exerting effort. The strong and hardened miners of 25 years or older who worked like this in 1860 and who persisted in this grueling labor are, for the most part, dead. Of those who are still alive today, 4/5 are physically broken men. In nature, we find alternating periods of rest and activity. Trees rest in winter, the flow of sap slows down, and there is no creation of leaves, flowers, or fruits. Birds and wild animals, after the summer breeding season, are content to eat and sleep. Some animals and reptiles sleep through the entire winter. Even the land itself must rest to produce the best harvests. When it is forced by constant artificial fertilization, the product is inferior in taste and nutritional quality compared to that grown in virgin soil. Disease, mold, and destructive insects are unknown to vegetation in its natural state. When human beings realize that they cannot demand from their bodies, year after year, the vigor of youth until the age of 40 or 50, nor sustain constant, intense nervous or mental strain without suffering severe damage, and when they understand that allowing states of rest and receptivity, as trees and animals do in their natural state, will enable them to receive much more of this renewing element, then they will enjoy far better physical health, greater muscular elasticity, vitality, and mental clarity. Moreover, they will awaken senses and faculties that escape most people. Certain Eastern and Indian races have, to some extent, access to these senses and faculties because they live a calmer life, in harmony with the seasons, like trees and animals. They do not possess our dominant and aggressive force, the one that invades and conquers temporarily, just as England conquered India, and our own people subdued and nearly exterminated the Native Americans. But note that this force does not ultimately prevail. The power of thought, which operates more effectively when the body is relatively inactive, is actually the strongest force that eventually triumphs. It is subtle, silent, and invisible, working with the highest intent. It refines and civilizes rough, warlike, and conquering races by grafting onto them the culture of the vanquished. Thus, the art and civilization of conquered Egypt were transmitted to Syria centuries later. The Assyrians, after being conquered, passed this power on to Greece. Greece fell before Rome, but Greek civilization prevailed in conquering Rome. Rome physically fell to the Goths and Vandals, as well as the wild northern European races of that time. Yet, in the realm of the spirit, it was the influence of ancient Italy that ultimately ruled over the Goths and Vandals of centuries past. In modern German, French, Spanish, and Italian cultures, every upheaval, agitation, and conquest has allowed this power to take root over a broader territory. Today, the most brilliant English minds are seriously studying the laws that they have finally recognized in India. And this force will, in a way, subdue England, for it is already sitting at India's feet, receiving its first lessons in the alphabet of laws and forces previously unknown to its scholars. You may wonder what this power is, how it was acquired and developed. It is the power that arises from the union of minds in a common purpose, in perfect harmony, without expending all its energy in physical activity. For if you invest all your mind and strength into the labor of your body, working with your hands day after day, year after year, without regard for the impulses and instincts of the seasons, then you confine all that energy to the mere function of the body, and you eventually exhaust it. You prevent it from operating beyond the body, and you also hinder the influx and assimilation of this renewing force of spring. You develop the habit of keeping the body in constant motion, depriving yourself of the restorative sleep that would provide the greatest strength for your waking hours. If both body and mind are fatigued day after day by the same mode of thought, the latter eventually wears out the former. Over time, a false belief forms that nothing has been accomplished unless physical labor has been performed. The brain cannot enter a state of true rest. Yet your power of thought could work independently of your body, bringing you results 100 times more beneficial than mere physical effort ever could. The quality in the leaf, root, or seed of the plant, which, when taken as medicine, acts on the internal organs, is the force of that plant released by the digestive process. The strength obtained from bread or meat is the force released through digestion. Digestion is a slow combustion of the ingested matter within the body, in the same way that coal burns in a boiler, and the force released by this combustion is used to operate the body just as an engineer uses heat to run a machine. The younger the sprout, the more tender its outer material formation, but this sprout, when used for medicinal purposes, contains the most active force, principle, and quality of the plant. Tea is made from the most tender shoots of the plant. In California, the sprout of the poison oak affects some people even if they are simply nearby. That is how powerful and airborne this harmful force is. The young shoots of spring contain this force, which will later make the leaf or branch more robust within your own body. In spring, the same tender elements exist inside you. Therefore, if your body is weak in spring, it is a sign that new shoots, so to speak, are forming within you and are filled with strength. But this force has not yet had time to act on your material organization to form new bones, muscles, and tendons, which will come later, provided that this new sprout or crystallization is not disturbed and possibly destroyed by improper exertion of the mind or body, causing the same relative damage to your body as a tree would suffer in a hurricane. You might say, how can I run my business and earn a living if I put my body into repair according to the laws of nature? I answer as follows. The laws of human affairs are not the laws of nature. If nature says to rest and man says to work and must work, then man is always the one who ultimately pays the price. What society calls vicious or harmful habits are not the only agents that bring disease, pain, and death. Thousands of people die each year in prolonged agony in respectable beds and among the best company. Tuberculosis, cancer, insanity, dropsy, rheumatism, fevers, and rage continue to ravage people who are considered the most proper by conventional standards. Why does this happen? If in your current life situation it is impossible for you to take the necessary rest and you intensely feel this need for a pause, trust that your persistent desire, your prayer, or your urgent request to receive and benefit from nature's regenerative forces will, in some way, create the opportunity for you to do so. When a need is deeply felt, the thought and desire arising from that feeling are in themselves a prayer, a force that will bring help and remove you from harmful environments and ways of living. This affirmation must be regularly repeated, as it is the primary source of all growth and progress toward a healthier and happier life. The Christ of Judea expressed this great law with the words, "Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." Wisely I refrain from seeking an explanation for this mystery, that human thought, desire, or sincere aspiration always brings the desired thing or result in due time. For this mystery, like others, is inexplicable. As soon as we propose an assumed cause for a particular result in nature's operation, we discover an even deeper mystery in the cause itself. We say that wind is moving air, but what is the factor that sets it in motion and keeps it so? Once we have explained the tides by the theory of the moon's attraction, what is it, beyond the tides, that maintains the vast system of currents constantly traversing the oceans? This has become clearer in the last 40 years. What power keeps our lungs breathing day and night, and our blood circulating throughout the body? Are they not all the power of God, of Spirit, or of the infinite force of good that acts within us, just as it acts in all that lives and grows? Only we have been given the knowledge necessary to work intelligently with this power. The body of the tree and of the animal eventually decays due to a lack of such intelligence. Thus, in the past, the material part of man has diminished, though this will not always be the case. The last great enemy to be destroyed, says Paul, is death. This implies that as man's knowledge and faith in the wonderful forces surrounding him increase, he will discover how to align himself with these forces. In doing so, he will make the mortal part immortal. We believe that immortality in the flesh is a possibility, that is, that a physical body can be preserved as long as the spirit wishes to use it, and that this body, instead of declining in strength and vigor with the years, can increase with its youth being perpetual. We believe that the fables of ancient mythologies referring to immortals or beings possessing powers different from and superior to mortals have a basis in reality. This possibility must be realized according to the law that every request or prayer of humanity must be accompanied by an offering. There is now a greater demand than ever for a longer and more perfect physical life, because more than ever, minds are seeing the highest possibilities of life and appreciating the value of living in the flesh. This demand often manifests in the form, "I have learned how to live, and yet it is almost time to die." The body will grow to achieve these results through a gradual series of spiritual processes that are constantly operating and changing, always spiritualizing and refining matter. These processes do not preserve the body someone has now, but rather a body that is continuously evolving and improving. Every disease, every lack of physical ease or affliction results from a spiritual process aimed at reconstructing the physical body, first by receiving new elements, then by expelling the old. However, behind this physical reconstruction, a far more important reconstruction of the spirit is taking place, from which the body is built. These processes are constantly ongoing within the body, acting through the skin, stomach, and other organs, as well as during periods of physical rest or discomfort previously mentioned. Every illness represents the renewed spirit's effort to attract a fresh influx of force and to rid itself of old, relatively lifeless matter. But since this intent has not been recognized by humanity, the spiritual process or effort, along with the pain and discomfort that accompany it, has been regarded and feared as a sign or approach of death. In this way, lacking knowledge of spiritual law and judging everything by the material, the temporary and necessary weakness of the body that accompanies this process has been seen as an evil without remedy. The belief of the past reinforces the false idea that, inevitably with time, the physical body must age, wither, weaken, and ultimately perish, with no power in the universe able to prevent it. The body continually changes its elements according to the state of mind. Under certain mental conditions, it incorporates elements of decay, weakness, and physical death. Under other mental conditions, it incorporates elements of strength and perpetual life. What the mind assumes in both cases are thoughts or beliefs. Thoughts and beliefs materialize in flesh and bone. The belief in inevitable decay and death draws from the spirit to the body the very elements of decay and death. The belief in the possibility of a constant influx of the spirit of life brings life. If a new life is added to you, there must also be a shedding of the old or relatively dead material of the body. Just as when a fresh influx of energy arrives to the tree in spring, it sheds the dead leaves that may have clung on all winter. Through a similar influx of our life or strength, an animal or bird annually sheds its old fur or feathers and adopts a new coat. In this way, corresponding changes occur throughout the organization of both birds and humans. This spiritual law operates in all forms and organizations in the most tangible way that we call matter. In human beings, this influx of strength is greater than in lower forms of life. It does not flow equally to all individuals. Some receive more than others. But as advancement continues, men and women will emerge who receive such an abundance of this influx that they will be compelled to perceive and realize these additional possibilities of existence. When our higher mind hears and receives new ideas or thoughts, our lower or material mind resists them. The body is the battlefield between these two forces, and it is also the one that suffers. As minds begin to trust even slightly in the supreme power and conceive the idea that disease and physical death are not absolute necessities, the higher power must ultimately prevail. An old error will be cast aside, and a new idea will take root. The body will be better and stronger after each successive struggle, and these struggles will also decrease in intensity until they disappear entirely. In the past, people lost their physical bodies because they did not understand that illness is a necessary process for the mind to rid itself of old material thoughts and adopt new ideas. They misused their strength by clinging to these thoughts. They retained them through their belief. Their belief will make their illness either a blessing or a curse. If you can maintain the belief that illness is a spiritual process for discarding old, worn-out elements, you greatly assist the mind in carrying out this process. However, if you believe that illness is purely a physical condition and has no benefit, you use your strength only to burden the mind with even more errors, which will ultimately manifest in the quality of flesh and blood. By minimizing the idea that your physical body, through constant renewal of substance, can become perpetual, You close one door to life and open another to decline and death. We do not claim that you must believe this, for your current state of mind may not allow it. Many things will happen in the future that none of us can yet believe in. However, if what is considered impossible is desirable, we may pray or demand faith that grants us a reason to believe, and such faith will come in response to the request. Faith means the power to believe in truth or the ability of the mind to receive true thoughts. Christopher Columbus's faith in the existence of a new continent was a power that helped him hold on to an idea greater than that of others in his time. Those who, in simple terms, have confidence in themselves possess real power to achieve their goals, a power greater than that of those who lack self-confidence. When you demand faith in possibilities for yourself that seem new and strange, you also demand the power and ability to attract to yourself the capacity to see or feel the reasons for new truths. If you constantly seek the truth and nothing but the truth, you will obtain it. And all truth means the power to accomplish apparent impossibilities. Your faith has healed you, said Jesus of Judea to a man who was cured of his afflictions. For us, this passage is interpreted to mean that the healed person had an innate power to believe that he could be cured. This power came from his own mind, not from Jesus, and it acted within his body, instantly healing him of his ailments. Jesus was a means to awaken this power in the man's mind, but Jesus himself did not give him this power, for it was latent within the healed person. Jesus awakened it for a time, probably only for temporary life and activity, because we do not hear of recorded cases of sudden healing at that time that were permanent. These people later fell ill again and eventually lost their bodies. Why? Because the faith or power they attracted for a brief moment failed to remain. They had not learned to continuously increase it through a silent demand for supreme power. Their minds fell back under the influence of material belief, and when that belief produced a burden too difficult to bear, they fell ill. There was no one like Christopher Columbus to awaken such power, or any power at all, and these individuals lacked the knowledge to do it themselves. No person can become permanently whole. This involves, among other faculties, immortality in the flesh and total permanent freedom from disease. To achieve this, you must have confidence in yourself and continuously rely on the Supreme to obtain the power of faith, without depending on anyone else. In this sense, every mind must be completely alone. You cannot obtain higher power if you constantly rely on the help of others. If you do, you are merely borrowing or absorbing their faith. This borrowed faith can work wonders for a time, but it will not be permanent. When this source of borrowing is cut off, you will fall back into the mire of discouragement and illness. In reality, you have never drawn from the proper source, the Supreme. The most beneficial demand or prayer for us, whether consciously or unconsciously expressed, is that our faith be made ever stronger. When you change your mental attitude toward illness and firmly believe that it is an effort of the mind to rid itself of erroneous thoughts absorbed since childhood, then those errors that have materialized in your body will gradually begin to change. You will stop carrying those errors, and you will also begin the process of releasing and eliminating all past erroneous thoughts. The illness you experienced many years ago, for example, due to fear of death, has, in a way, stored that particular memory of a fearful mindset within you, along with the accompanying belief. All these years, this belief has worked against you, just as any erroneous belief works against you. It is literally a part of your real being, just as all past memories and individual experiences are a literal part of your present being. It is stored in your spiritual memory, even though its material recollection may have faded. This memory is a reality in thought, but it is the memory of a false belief that teaches that death and decay can never be overcome. Reversing your mindset regarding illness, firmly believing that it is an effort of the spirit to rid itself of the old erroneous thoughts you have absorbed since childhood, will allow you to expel this belief. However, such expulsion must have a corresponding expression in the flesh. The physical manifestations of all your past illnesses, colds, fevers, and others, must disappear. At first, they may be severe, but gradually, in a modified form, they will fade away. Right now, you are in the process of shedding your old erroneous beliefs. But if your belief is not reversed, and you continue to see physical decay and death as inevitable, then with each illness experienced in that mindset, you add another error. another false belief, another burden to your accumulation of deceptions. This effect, combined with others, weakens, crushes, and ultimately causes the loss of the body. In physical life, there is never a moment too late to receive or accept the truth. There is never a time too advanced for this truth to begin its process of physical renewal. And even if this particular physical life does not persist, the spirit, by receiving this truth, receives a strength that will be invaluable on the other side, in the invisible. With this help, it may be able to build for itself a more perfected spiritual body. And the ultimate goal of the relatively perfected spiritual body is the power to grow and live in both the physical and spiritual realms of existence. If you cling to the idea that humanity will always continue as in the past, losing its bodies and remaining powerless to maintain them in perfect health, you limit your perspective. There are higher possibilities and deeper truths that you can open yourself to if you are willing to believe and receive them. Then, you set your belief in opposition to the eternal fact that all things on this planet are always progressing toward greater refinement, greater powers, and greater possibilities. Medicine and material remedies can be of great help in the process of expulsion. A knowledgeable and understanding physician from any school can be of great assistance. Everything depends on the mindset and belief with which you take the medicine and follow the doctor's advice. If you see both as aids for your spirit to free itself from a burden and build a new body for you, then with that belief, you provide great assistance to the spirit in its process of liberation and construction. However, if you believe that medicine and the doctor are merely supports for the body, and that the body is destined to weaken and perish at some point within the next 30, 40, or 50 years, then you are clinging to belief in error faster than you are shedding it. Eventually, the burden will become too heavy for the spirit to carry. This is what causes men and women to stoop with age, to have weak shoulders and feeble knees, and their gait to seem labored, because they believe only in what is earthly and perishable. The spirit is neither earthly nor perishable, though you can burden it with an earthly quality of thought that weighs it down toward the earth. With such a burden, it is not the old man's physical body that is bent and bowed. It is the force that animates the body, the spirit laden with material thoughts. It can no longer appropriate or assimilate properly, and thus it becomes curved, bent, and weakened. The body is always an external reflection of the spirit. A body that renews, beautifies, refreshes, and strengthens itself signifies a spirit that is being renewed with new ideas, plans, hopes, goals, and aspirations. Eternal life is not the half-dead existence of extreme old age. The person who sees only the physical side and temporary expression of life, who eats and drinks believing that only food and drink affect the body, who thinks that the body is sustained solely by the force it generates within itself, and that it is not nourished by an invisible element from the spiritual realm. This person believes that there is nothing beyond what can be seen, heard, or felt with the physical senses, meaning only matter, which is always temporary and perishable. This kind of thinking attracts forces and elements that lead to transience and decay. The death of the body begins thousands of years before it reaches the grave with a pale face and parchment-like skin. This means a half-dead skin. In other words, a part of the body in which the spirit is engaged in the process of expelling the dead element and taking in the new, but imperfectly. In the freshness of childhood and youth, the spirit expelled and appropriated with greater force. Over the years, falsehood was absorbed by this spirit. Its growth and knowledge slowed, and its response to physical changes became more sluggish. The body began to show signs of aging, that is, of death, because this spirit was feeding less and less on the element that constantly brings renewal of new thought, which is new life. At such a point, belief and faith in weakness and decline prevail in the race. Wisdom is often allegorically represented as a bald, stooped old man leaning on a staff. This represents a wisdom that cannot prevent its own body from decaying in this manner, which we call aging. A spirit that has entered possession of a new body exists for a time with greater spiritual wisdom than when the child is physically more mature. This is the unconscious wisdom of intuition, which is more open to truth. Up until the age of 18 or 20, the processes of detachment and spiritual appropriation with the body occur with a higher degree of perfection. These relatively rapid changes in physical appearance maintain youth and freshness. However, sooner or later, the higher spiritual process gradually ceases to function. The beliefs in falsehood, as taught and absorbed from others, materialize in the body despite all the resistance of the higher spirit, expressed in pain and illness. The burden of belief in what is earthly and ephemeral accumulates. The body takes on an appearance corresponding to this thought. Eventually, the higher spirit refuses to continue bearing such a load. It detaches from it and leaves behind an inanimate body. The death of the body is thus the final process by which the spirit frees itself from the most superfluous elements that can no longer be used or appropriated. However, it is desirable that the spirit should be able to maintain a physical body capable of refining itself, just as the spirit refines itself. Because when the equality of refinement between spirit and its instrument is achieved, our happiness increases greatly, and the relatively perfected unfolding of our faculties can only be realized when this union between spirit and body takes place. When the Christ of Judea told the elders of Israel about the little child, "Unless you become like these children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven," he meant, as we interpret it, that they must be as open to this influence of force as the spirit of the child is at that period of its life. If this influence were maintained, the youthfulness of the body would be perpetual. The child is more guided by the spirit than the adult. He is more natural, rejects politics, and openly shows whom he likes and dislikes. He often has more intuition. He dislikes a bad person even when his parents see nothing wrong in them. He knows, or rather feels, more about life than his parents attribute to him, but he cannot express his thoughts in words. However, the thoughts are always present. He has not yet learned to conform to the two-faced habit of the world, one that smiles at you while mocking behind your back. It is relatively natural for his spirit to express itself freely for a time. When the spirit loses its freedom of expression, when we pretend to be what we are not, when we say one thing outwardly but think another inwardly, when we flatter only to gain favor, when we feel anger, disappointment, or irritation inside but pretend to be satisfied and happy outside, we become increasingly unnatural in everything. We fall asleep to all righteous desires. For a time, we destroy all higher spiritual senses and powers. We become unable to distinguish truth from falsehood. We are incapable of spiritually feeling what faith means, let alone attracting this great and essential power to us. And without this power of attraction, the physical body must be abandoned by the spirit. It is not the body that abandons the spirit, but the spirit that rejects the material body. When your spirit rejects unbelief, it becomes more open to thoughts and things that are true. Therefore, it grows with greater power and acts in all parts and functions of the body. The process of rejection becomes faster, as it was in material youth. As a result, it will reject through the senses of touch and taste anything that could harm or corrupt you. It can reach such a power that even an active poison, if accidentally placed in the mouth, would be instantly detected and rejected, or if swallowed, would be immediately expelled from the stomach. It is not the physical stomach that rejects unsuitable foods or expels harmful doses. It is the spirit directing the organ according to its own knowledge. It knows that the rejected substance is inappropriate because there is neither spirit nor quality in it that can be assimilated to aid the spirit. As the spirit grows in power, this sensitivity to all things that may harm you, whether they come from the world of visible or invisible things, will increase and sharpen. It will instantly alert you to the presence of anything harmful and reject it. It will tell you what is safe and appropriate for your association. Finally, it will reject or refuse to receive all negative thoughts that you may currently absorb daily without realizing it, which cause more harm than anything material because they poison the spirit. As faith increases, the spirit will summon many material aids that will greatly contribute to the renewal processes. These aids will influence food choices, appropriate associations, and other changes in habits and customs. However, it is the spirit that must direct and guide these material aids. When the impulse arises, you will be compelled to follow it. You will not eat the food that should be avoided. Your taste will reject it. You will not be able to keep harmful company. Habits that need to change will disappear easily and immediately. But if you establish strict rules in these matters, hoping that they will later become spiritualized, you are allowing your material self to take the reins. The spirit has increased in faith. Let it do the work. And when the time comes to refuse any animal food or any coarse element in any form, the desire and taste for it will have vanished. In affirming our belief in immortality in the flesh, we do not imply that it is something that anyone physically alive can achieve, nor do we infer that it is something that cannot be accomplished. We do not argue that people should immediately undertake material work with the goal of living forever. We simply argue that it is a result that must inevitably occur sooner or later, a product of this evolution and growth of the spirit, transitioning from the coarser to the finer, which has always been at work on this planet and in all forms of matter. Matter is spirit temporarily materialized to be evident to the corresponding physical sense. As we grow in faith in these spiritual processes, rejecting the old to embrace the new, and consequently achieving the greater refinement or spiritualization of the body that accompanies it, we will increasingly help those closer to us in the invisible side of life. For as we spiritualize more in the flesh, we help them materialize the spirit more. In other words, we will become tangible to one another, for in the material thought that we reject, there is an element that can be appropriated to gain more materiality. Their spiritual bodies are also subject to the same laws regarding the process of detachment and appropriation. What we reject as the most useless thing is, for them, the finest and most appropriate thing. We spiritually absorb this element, which is for us a spiritual nourishment and signifies life. Through what we reject, they are helped to materialize the spirit. The temptation of aspiration exists because we cannot maintain a state of mental serenity. We are subject to periods of depression, even when we are well positioned according to our life ideal. We are still more or less affected by the lack of harmony that prevails around us. You are kind and compassionate toward animal creation, but wild birds, your pets, the free animals that come to build their nests in the forest, are killed for sport or profit before your eyes, and you can do nothing about it. You live amidst a scene of cruelty and constant killing. Animals raised by humans are raised in artificial conditions, causing them to develop unnaturally and truly unhealthily for amusement or profit. This applies to all kinds of fantastical farming. Nature, when left alone, does its best for the birds or animals, and they have individual rights, just like humans. A taste imposed by force will cause an enlarged and sick liver in a goose, ultimately making it a special dish. Its breed is raised in unhealthy conditions. Illness means misfortune, both mental and physical, directly and indirectly. This misfortune affects you. If your organization is more subtle and open, a finer life will be easily disturbed by the evils around it. It is hard to travel abroad without suffering from mental or physical pain. Your houses, cars, and boats in winter are overheated and filled with harmful vapors from the fuel used, as well as emanations from the human bodies inside. You may be forced to sleep in rooms where unhealthy heat is partly relied upon for warmth. When you are resting, you must breathe it in, and when you are in the unconscious state of recovery, you wake up with it incorporated into your being. You are exposed to consuming rot and decay, even at the best of your tables. Scenes of cruelty, brutality, and injustice deeply affect you. It is the predominant thought, active in the atmosphere of the crowd, that influences your thinking. There is a thought, if you want to call it that, or a mental action embodied in everything material around you. The brightness or darkness of thought depends on the state of the material thing. Eating spoiled fruits or vegetables can indirectly bring you sadness. Fresh and living fruits bring you life. Decay is the disorganization of matter. You want to nourish yourself with perfect organization that is not yet ripe. You want it at its most vibrant stage so that you can receive it in this state. You do not unconsciously respect, out of ignorance and even necessity, many laws of physical and mental health regarding food, air, or heat. As mentioned earlier, you have always been dependent on artificial supports. You may have come into the world with a body that has undergone partial development through artificial and inappropriate nutrition, and an unnatural life passed down through the blood of many generations. This artificial life must somehow bring pain. Its alcoholic stimulant briefly brightens, but leads to a longer period of suffering. However, the harm of alcohol is actually minimal compared to the countless causes of human suffering operating daily around you, in crowded places, and which are more dangerous because they are unknown. You are probably wondering why, even in solitude, we cannot maintain a certain balance and mental serenity that we recognize enough to desire. Suppose that, in the previous state, you were physically ill, and of course mentally as well. You expect to heal instantly from such a long-lasting illness. Some thought patterns can only be eliminated gradually. The same applies to certain bodily behaviors that arise from thought patterns, such as rushing, worrying, paying excessive attention to things that are not the most necessary at the moment, borrowing problems from others, and many others. They permeate and influence all acts of life. Their combined effect is exhaustion, and exhaustion is the true source of most of the body's ailments. Anything that exhausts the body, whether through movement, effort for good or ill, kindness or selfishness, diminishes the power to resist these many causes of pain, and the subsequent dejection of the spirit. As long as materiality or the earthly side predominates, we primarily see the earthly side of things, and primarily perceive what is repulsive in individuals. We are slow to see the good, we love only a few and hate many others. But when the spirit predominates, it reverses. We clearly see the good in all, we are more attracted, and by finding the good in everyone, we receive that good from others. We no longer feel so strongly repelled by individual prejudices. We love more than we hate. Yet as long as materiality prevails, we feel more hate than love. We see more things to hate and despise than to admire. We are blind to the good and overly sensitive to the evil. We see and feel it more, and it hurts us. To hate, to have strong prejudices, to be unable to hear the name of the hated person without shuddering with indignation or disgust, is to constantly harm oneself. Cynicism arises from repulsion and personal prejudice carried to the extreme. The cynic ends up finding everyone insufferable and ultimately hates himself. No cynic ever has good health, for cynicism is poisoning of the blood. The cynic always seeks the ideal outside when he should find it within. Once found, he would always create ideals, for his own loving spirit would attach itself to them and build both within himself and in all those with whom he comes into contact divinity. Divinity is contagious, and it would be a poor divine plan to allow only the contagion of evil. Kindness is contagious in its time, and the world will learn that health is too. However, up to this point, humanity has come to admire those who have embraced evil as if they were the only source of inoculation. While it is expected that all forms of good should enter poor human nature through painful and laborious processes, the highest health and strength cannot exist without sufficient aspiration and purity of thought. Pure thought brings the purest blood, while impure thought weakens, despairs, complains, seeks scapegoats, slanders and worries, all of which will inevitably make the blood impure and fill the system with disease. Without aspiration, the best care of the body is relatively useless. You can be scrupulously clean regarding your clothes and personal hygiene, and you can give maximum attention to your diet, but after all, you are just cleaning the outside of a container that continually fills with dirt. With growing purity of thought, body maintenance and care will become a natural result. The container will clean itself. Proper care of the body, in all its aspects, will be an act of love for the physical form. Bathing will not be a forced task, but a recreation. The diet will be regulated by the natural demand of appetite, and taste or pleasure will be the norm for acceptance or rejection. Excesses will be impossible, as a healthy palate will be attentive to consider the first sign of satiety as the signal to stop all indulgence. This aspiration toward the best and the highest is what, over time, leads to a true rebirth of the body, a total reform of the quality and composition of the flesh, bones, blood, muscles and tendons, a change in material organization corresponding to the spiritual dimension. The flesh is spiritualized, meaning it is made of finer elements. This process occurs in all aspirants. The temptation of aspiration exists because we cannot maintain a state of mental serenity. We are subject to periods of depression, even when we are well positioned according to our life ideal. We are still more or less affected by the lack of harmony that prevails around us. You are kind and compassionate toward animal creation, but wild birds, your pets, the free animals that come to build their nests in the forest, are killed for sport or profit before your eyes, and you can do nothing about it. You live amidst a scene of cruelty and constant killing. Animals raised by humans are raised in artificial conditions, causing them to develop unnaturally and truly unhealthily for amusement or profit. This applies to all kinds of fantastical farming. Nature, when left alone, does its best for the birds or animals, and they have individual rights, just like humans. A taste imposed by force will cause an enlarged and sick liver in a goose. ultimately making it a special dish. Its breed is raised in unhealthy conditions. Illness means misfortune, both mental and physical, directly and indirectly. This misfortune affects you. If your organization is more subtle and open, a finer life will be easily disturbed by the evils around it. It is hard to travel abroad without suffering from mental or physical pain. Your houses, cars, and boats in winter are overheated and filled with harmful vapors from the fuel used, as well as emanations from the human bodies inside. You may be forced to sleep in rooms where unhealthy heat is partly relied upon for warmth. When you are resting, you must breathe it in, and when you are in the unconscious state of recovery, you wake up with it incorporated into your being. You are exposed to consuming rot and decay, even at the best of your tables. Scenes of cruelty, brutality, and injustice deeply affect you. It is the predominant thought, active in the atmosphere of the crowd, that influences your thinking. There is a thought, if you want to call it that, or a mental action embodied in everything material around you. The brightness or darkness of thought depends on the state of the material thing. Eating spoiled fruits or vegetables can indirectly bring you sadness. Fresh and living fruits bring you life. Decay is the disorganization of matter. You want to nourish yourself with perfect organization that is not yet ripe. You want it at its most vibrant stage, so that you can receive it in this state. You do not unconsciously respect, out of ignorance and even necessity, many laws of physical and mental health regarding food, air, or heat. As mentioned earlier, you have always been dependent on artificial supports. You may have come into the world with a body that has undergone partial development through artificial and inappropriate nutrition, and an unnatural life passed down through the blood of many generations. This artificial life must somehow bring pain. Its alcoholic stimulant briefly brightens, but leads to a longer period of suffering. However, the harm of alcohol is actually minimal compared to the countless causes of human suffering operating daily around you, in crowded places, and which are more dangerous because they are unknown. You are probably wondering why, even in solitude, we cannot maintain a certain balance and mental serenity that we recognize enough to desire. Suppose that, in the previous state, you were physically ill, and of course mentally as well. You expect to heal instantly from such a long-lasting illness. Some thought patterns can only be eliminated gradually. The same applies to certain bodily behaviors that arise from thought patterns, such as rushing, worrying, paying excessive attention to things that are not the most necessary at the moment, borrowing problems from others, and many others. They permeate and influence all acts of life. Their combined effect is exhaustion, and exhaustion is the true source of most of the body's ailments. Anything that exhausts the body, whether through movement, effort for good or ill, kindness or selfishness, diminishes the power to resist these many causes of pain, and the subsequent dejection of the spirit. As long as materiality or the earthly side predominates, we primarily see the earthly side of things and primarily perceive what is repulsive in individuals. We are slow to see the good, we love only a few and hate many others. But when the spirit predominates, it reverses. We clearly see the good in all, we are more attracted, and by finding the good in everyone, we receive that good from others. We no longer feel so strongly repelled by individual prejudices. We love more than we hate, yet as long as materiality prevails, we feel more hate than love. We see more things to hate and despise than to admire. We are blind to the good and overly sensitive to the evil. We see and feel it more, and it hurts us. To hate, to have strong prejudices, to be unable to hear the name of the hated person without shuddering with indignation or disgust, is to constantly harm oneself. Cynicism arises from repulsion and personal prejudice carried to the extreme. The cynic ends up finding everyone insufferable and ultimately hates himself. No cynic ever has good health, for cynicism is poisoning of the blood. The cynic always seeks the ideal outside when he should find it within. Once found, he would always create ideals, for his own loving spirit would attach itself to them and build, both within himself and in all those with whom he comes into contact, divinity. Divinity is contagious, and it would be a poor divine plan to allow only the contagion of evil. Kindness is contagious in its time, and the world will learn that health is too. However, up to this point humanity has come to admire those who have embraced evil, as if they were the only source of inoculation. While it is expected that all forms of good should enter poor human nature through painful and laborious processes, the highest health and strength cannot exist without sufficient aspiration and purity of thought. Pure thought brings the purest blood, while impure thought weakens, despairs, complains, seeks scapegoats, slanders and worries, all of which will inevitably make the blood impure and fill the system with disease. Without aspiration, the best care of the body is relatively useless. You can be scrupulously clean regarding your clothes and personal hygiene, and you can give maximum attention to your diet, but after all, you are just cleaning the outside of a container that continually fills with dirt. With growing purity of thought, body maintenance and care will become a natural result. The container will clean itself. Proper care of the body, in all its aspects, will be an act of love for the physical form. Bathing will not be a forced task, but a recreation. The diet will be regulated by the natural demand of appetite, and taste or pleasure will be the norm for acceptance or rejection. Excesses will be impossible, as a healthy palate will be attentive to consider the first sign of satiety as the signal to stop all indulgence. This aspiration toward the best and the highest is what, over time, leads to a true rebirth of the body, a total reform of the quality and composition of the flesh, bones, blood, muscles and tendons, a change in material organization corresponding to the spiritual dimension. The flesh is spiritualized, meaning it is made of finer elements. This process occurs in all aspirants. The control of the mind over the flesh brings perfect immunity against diseases, strengthens all forces, and significantly increases the capacity for effort in any field. At the end of earthly life, it ensures a painless departure of the spirit, a simple transition into the sleep of the earthly body, and a waking on the other side, the spiritual side of life. The path of self-healing involves asking for the elements of health and strength in order to expel disease. This means praying for these elements, and they will come to you. Strength or vigor is an element of the spirit or more refined matter. The more you exercise your will to ask for it, the more quickly it will come. This is the secret to maintaining and constantly increasing the vigor of any other desired quality. When you notice signs of a lack of power and are sensitive to it, it is time to call, pray, and desire more intensely. Communion with the elements brings an immediate flow of strength. As soon as you find yourself in certain conditions for such an influx, say, you wake up in the morning feeling weak, languid, with no physical or mental energy. Avoid focusing your mind on your affliction as much as possible. You must keep yourself, to the best of your ability, in the thought of strength, vigor, health, and activity. Build this state of mind with the help of symbols of strength and power in nature, such as storms, the raging sea, the majesty of the ocean, the morning sun rising in all its glory to invigorate man, animal, and vegetation. If you find prose or poetry illustrations of this kind that strongly affect you, appeal to them. Read them aloud or silently, for in doing so you are directing your mind in the right direction to receive all the strength. In summary, think of strength and power, and you will attract them. Think of health, and you will obtain it. Let your mind dwell on weakness, and you will never recover. Think of darkness, discouragement, and gloom, and you will attract harmful and contrary elements, just as decay breeds decay in the things we see. Similarly, a weak, decadent order of thought attracts its like. Unconsciously, many sick and suffering people pay more attention to their complaints than to their bodies that carry them. They constantly think about their ailments and talk about them. In reality, they seek sympathy for the pain more than for the body afflicted by it. The sympathy emanating from the friends around them certainly nourishes the wound and increases the pain, while the thought of the patient and their friends should be focused on a healthy and strong body for the patient. The more this thought is focused on the patient by those around them, the more power it will have to attract vigor to relieve the sufferer. It is worth noting that it should not be stated here that this relief will always be immediate. A mind that has long been unconsciously oriented in the direction of the weakness of the self cannot immediately reverse its movement to orient itself in the opposite direction and gain strength. It may have become so accustomed and trained to reside in the dark side that it can barely focus on another. But as effort is made and persevered, more power will come to put it in the desired framework of strength attraction. Effort must be made. It may take time, but every atom of effort thus accomplished is an accumulation that can never be lost. Do not arbitrarily or tyrannically demand that no part of your body heal, or that no organ or function be strengthened. Your body as a whole is an individual distinct from your mind, with its own physical life. As a whole, it is an organization composed of several other organizations, each having a specific task: the eye to see, the ear to hear, the tongue to taste, the stomach to digest, or the lungs to breathe. In a certain sense, these are individual organizations. Each one of them is open to the vivifying and stimulating effect of the element called love, and this element can heal a wound with love and tenderness. This element not only inspires attentive and gentle treatment, but it also penetrates the wound, acting as a balm and a force. It gradually repairs the broken parts. If you treat them with indifference, if you bind or wash them as a tedious task, the feeling not only inspires negligent or even rough treatment, but it also fails to heal and strengthen with the necessary element love. If you mix it with true hatred, you poison the affected part. Hatred is the element of poison. Love is the element of healing. The same principle and process apply to a weak eye, a deaf ear, or any sick or weak organ. Sometimes this feeling is directed toward the sick organ, and with this mind, you ask the organ to regain its strength. Do not be dissuaded by the apparent simplicity of this statement, but try it. If you become impatient or angry with the eye or ear because they are not perfect in their function, you are only injecting this element of impatience into these organs, irritating and disturbing them in their efforts to do their best. There is not yet a relatively perfect life in our race, because such a life means a body and life without age or pain, and also a life without the current form of death of the body. A relatively perfect life means a life in which a spirit has grown or gathered so much power simply by asking, praying for power, or in other words, by putting that spirit as a magnet in the right attitude to attract power, which will be constantly capable of regenerating or working on the body with fresher, newer and finer material, and also putting or removing this body, materializing it at will, just as Christ did immediately after his crucifixion. The Jews had only destroyed his material body. The Spirit of Christ had the power to clothe itself with a new one. Another illustration of this is the translation of the prophet Elijah to heaven. What his companion Elisha saw was Elijah's spiritual or finer body, the counterpart of his material body, and this body was made of such a fine element that it entered the sphere of the divine and could use an attraction that is even more recognized by our scientists, the attraction or power that pulls upwards. This is the opposite of the gravitational attraction, which pulls downwards or towards the earth. The attraction of aspiration, every thought or desire to be nobler, more refined, free of malice, ill will toward others, and to do good to others without expecting conditions, is a cause, a force of an invisible element that truly tends to pull upward, that is, away from the earth, or any form of the grosser spirit that can be seen by the physical eye, or apparently felt by the touch of the body we call matter. It is the order of aspirational thought that you attract from the higher realms of spirit or element every time you ask for it, pray for it, or desire it. Thus, you attract toward yourself the invisible element that becomes incorporated into your body and mind. Then, it literally begins to pull you toward the realm and the element of greater, larger, and purer life that exists in the zones or bands around our planet. As you persist in this aspirational thought, it straightens you. The expression, the upright man or woman, implies that the effect of this invisible element brings back the aspiration and serves you physically and spiritually. It straightens every physical organ into place. It is the current of thought that attracts from above, the state of mind of impure or immature thoughts, the state of mind of reckless or personal selfishness that seeks only self-satisfaction without thinking or caring about others. The thought or state of mind of sadness, discouragement, or despair comes from the dominant attraction of visible or physical earthly things. When you are dominated by the attraction of gravity, or in other words, the attraction of material things, your shoulders slump, your head tilts, and your gaze goes downward. Your heart is also, in a way, literally inclined by pain, worry, or anger, just as it is by an immature thought or attraction coming from visible things, or the crudest forms of spirit. All the organs of the body will also be moved and directed toward the earth. There is always an exact and literal correspondence between things and material forms, and things and spiritual forms. The shape of the body of every man and woman, the expression of the face, all gestures and mannerisms, even the fold of a finger, and your physical health, Everything is an exact correspondence of your spiritual state. In other words, the state of your mind is a duplication in visible matter, and in the movement of what you think in invisible matter. As the attraction of aspiration increasingly governs you, the desire to become more divine or diviner, and the determination to conquer all evil in you will grow. This is the only way to conquer all evil in you and outside of you. This will make your body grow in a more upright manner. Your eye will be more open and raised, your heart will rise, and your cheeks will flush more. Your blood will be increasingly filled with a finer and more powerful element, giving your limbs strength, vigor, flexibility, and elasticity of movement. Then you will fill yourself more and more with the elixir of life, which is not a myth, but a reality and a spiritual possibility. So far, our race has been dominated by the attraction of material things or the visible element. It has been said that only what can be seen or felt through the lower external senses exists. Therefore, there was nothing more for us. A man may appear to be thirsty, surrounded by sources of fresh water, and if he does not know they exist, there is none for him. Our condition has been similar to that of the more perfected race of the future. On this planet, there will be no painful death of the body as it is now. Any painful death of this type is the direct result of sin and transgression of the law of life. The future end of the body will be the birth or development of a new physical body, for which the old body will serve as a shell or envelope until the new one is mature and ready to emerge, similar to the development of the caterpillar into a butterfly. Such developments and transitions will occur at increasingly shorter intervals until eventually the spirit will attain such power that it will be able to instantly will and attract a body from the surrounding elements to use at its will in this stratum of life. This is the condition foreseen by Paul when he said, "O death, where is your sting?" And again he writes, "The last enemy that will be destroyed is death." We quote Paul because no ancient master predicted these possibilities more clearly than he did. These truths, these wonders, these miracles correspond to our time and era. However, ours are not common or prosaic times and periods. It is our lack of clarity that may make our era appear vulgar. We live surrounded by the same elements, and we possess the same powers in greater or lesser measure. This is how the 3 young Jews survived the fire unharmed, how the prophet Daniel calmed the ferocity of the lions in the den by exercising a higher power of human thought, how Paul shook off the venom of the serpent, and how the man from Nazareth accomplished his marvelous works. Wasn't that the power of God, you may ask, if the power of God, or the infinite and incomprehensible Spirit of eternal good that works through His children, is the same power that can work through us? The more we call upon it, ask for it, bother it, and depend on it, the more we depend on the power of the higher spirit over the lower spirit. Or, to simplify, every visible element or matter is an expression of the lower spirit. Rocks, hills, clouds, waves, trees, animals, and humans are various expressions of the lower, coarser spirit. The power of the spirit over matter means the power of the higher spirit over all these manifestations of the lower spirit. Aspiration, sincere prayer, or the desire to become a better person, to acquire more power, to rise and refine our nature, will bring more subtle elements and forces, which we call the spirit. However, the motivation must be the natural desire of the heart to share what you receive with others. You cannot achieve the fullness of this power if your intention is to live only for yourself. You may accomplish much with it to some extent, but if you live solely for yourself, your request will eventually bring only pain, illness, and disappointment based on selfish motives. Adherence to new thought. A new thought is a new life. When an invention or discovery first arises in the mind of the inventor, it fills them with joy. The blood flowing through their veins becomes more vigorous. Authors or poets feel exalted by a new conception. I'm referring to the relatively few creative authors and poets, not to the many borrowers of genius who use it to pass it off as their own. Good news, as we call it, in a time of melancholy, depression, or discouragement, the possible realization of a hope, the elimination of a wrong or a danger, are only thoughts, mental images of what we desire. It is not the thing itself, but it brings strength to the entire body. An entertaining show, a perfectly performed drama that captures all attention, an interview with someone we feel a strong attraction to, an activity, exercise, or art that interests and fascinates us, All of these are like food and nourishment, a stimulant for the body. In the absorption or excitement of the moment, the hunger for material food may disappear or be forgotten. Man does not live by bread alone, but our natures always crave new food for thought. The play, however charming when first seen, can become boring by repetition. The air, so fascinating when first heard, can lose its appeal through familiarity. We may even desire a change in the quality of thought, something more attractive to us. I refer to all these changes, but only for a certain time. The play, opera, or artist may be revisited over time and be even more appreciated, whether through the influence of internal association, new variations and nuances in the artist's interpretation, or a new ability to see what we couldn't see before. So let us consider that every new thinker, and if we wish, every new emotion, is food, an essential element for a man or woman to be physically and relatively perfect, just like the bread we eat. We always desire fresh food in the same way we desire and need new thoughts. An old thought, the constant repetition of the same thought, implies the decadence and laziness of the mind and body. Suppose we were to rise every morning with absolute certainty that every day will be a day that excites us to discover something useful and pleasant, as well as something useful and pleasant for others. This is bearable both for us and for others. Bearable for eternity. An unexpected branching of the truth from yesterday, which seemed already fully developed, could be like food for the mind. It would tell us how life can be even fuller of true and harmless pleasure. Some of the great principles of the law of nature may have been recognized for the first time in phenomena previously considered insignificant, like the fall of a leaf or the color change caused by autumn frost. Imagine the joy of an open and receptive mind that finds today an argument in favor of the almost desperate quality improvement of yesterday. An increase in patience in performing perplexing work, an increase in courage, an increase in perception to see beauty in what was unnoticed yesterday, an increase in the power to control a rebellious appetite, an increase in the power to push away unpleasant and therefore harmful thoughts. These encouraging and stimulating thoughts preserve life and health. This order and adherence to always new thoughts knows no interruption in any direction. This means the following. If you are disciplined today, you will find the power, space, and ability to be even more disciplined tomorrow. If your last effort was in music, painting, composition, performance, or oratory, your greatest triumph will give you a way to perfect it even more tomorrow. It will not take away from your last effort. It will simply add a more beautiful and delicate touch to an already magnificent picture. The awareness of this endless growth of improvement is also food for the growing mind, different from bread. However, bread is the bread of life and must be desired as our daily bread. Would it not also be a thought every morning that the great power, an infinitely wise spirit, is always ready to bring you more knowledge to help you through both external and internal problems? Would it not be a thought and the confidence that follows it, like food, a force, and a healthy stimulus? Especially when the reality of this power and its ability to help has been repeatedly proven, to the point where hope has turned into conviction, it grants the possibility that new thought is a healthy stimulant and also a necessary food for a more perfect life. And then comes the question, how are we going to achieve this? In other words, how can we align or become more receptive to everything that is beautiful and useful in nature? For in our religion, the useful always implies the beautiful. It is almost an incorrect response to say to live a pure life, because it implies, in many cases, an inherent tendency that must be overcome, as well as multiple difficulties and conditions necessary to carry out this demanding life. To achieve it, it is necessary to address both the internal and the external. The desire for accumulation seems to be a law of our nature in its simplest functioning. The one who accumulates money, in its highest form, would accumulate powers and qualities of the mind. Being $500 richer than one was this morning is satisfying. The evening pleasure of the money accumulator is a kind of bread of life for him, but it is not sustainable life. Or if life is healthy, I can affirm that tonight I am richer than I was this morning, thanks to greater patience, a little more skill or dexterity in my art, and some knowledge that I did not have 24 hours ago. We are already fully awakened to the idea that we are vessels of thoughts and knowledge, and that our capacity to receive all of this can be unlimited. The stock of knowledge, power, and new thoughts in the universe is also unlimited, and everything is at our disposal. The bank cannot be depleted any more than eternity can end. There are thousands of things, events, and scenes in your past life that are more profitable to forget than to remember. By forgetting, you open the door to a new idea, which is, in fact, a new life. By remembering, you prevent the arrival of this new idea and new life. When I say forget, I mean that you must avoid living only in unpleasant scenes and memories of the past. Forgetting or completely erasing from memory anything you once recorded is impossible, because everything you have seen, learned, felt, or heard is stored and capable, under certain circumstances, of being recalled to memory. Destroying such memories, if it were possible, would be equivalent to destroying a large part of your mind. All experiences are valuable for the wisdom they bring or suggest, but once you have gained wisdom and knowledge from an experience, it is of little use to repeat it, especially if it was unpleasant. Living by constantly ruminating on the misfortunes and disappointments of the past prevents the arrival of new ideas and new lives. This is what people do who obsess over the misfortunes and disappointments of the past. And this is what people do who remember their youth as bright and joyful compared to the darkness of their middle or advanced age. Do not embellish the past with its brilliance and freshness, and do not place it on the dark background of the present. Do not forget that the time of your childhood and youth, with all its freshness and novelty, was also the time of old age for others, when the world seemed joyless and stale. Everything that life seemed capable of offering was exhausted, and only withering and death remained. Also remember that if the world seems less bright today than it did before, if the sun seems to be setting rather than rising, for the children and young people of 10 or 15 years old, it seems today exactly what it seemed to you at that age. No one could maintain their physical health and enjoy life if, in living, they remained anchored in the past and refused to open their mind to the future. By constantly accumulating the old and relatively inanimate thoughts, you materialize that element in your body. Your flesh, your bones, and your blood then become a real expression of a dead and inert mind. Living while carrying an increasingly heavy burden can only lead to weakness and unhappiness, as much as the spirit can bear. But the spirit that rejects the old, which no longer serves it, and continues to reach toward the new, adds new thoughts to itself. This novelty of ideas will produce a newer body. In fact, you make things from the past seem pleasant or unpleasant based on how you anticipate them. There is a category of people who, when they find themselves in difficulty and someone suggests a way out, submit this suggestion to a rigorous thinking process, and if they are convinced it is possible, they immediately put it into practice. Other people see a new aspect of the situation each time they think about it, so they never decide on anything. Still, others are afraid of failure. Some are afraid to act, afraid of what others will say, afraid of the future. Some are indifferent, so by listening to each other, one might think that all these reasons are good for total inaction, for an inability to get out of difficulties, for a life of misery and failure. It is like this for many people, but for others, these same reasons, if they were stated, would be powerful incentives to act. They would be challenges to rise to and obstacles to overcome. In life, there are people who feel these challenges, who see the obstacles, and who respond to the call of the challenge. The world in which you live is what you make of it, and for many, it is what you believe it is. For some, it is a place of suffering, struggle, defeat, and disappointment. For others, it is a place of happiness, progress, success, and joy. Each person creates their own world by the way they react to life and the circumstances that arise. Do not let the worries of the past cloud your present or block the future that awaits you. Do not be the person who cannot move forward because of a fixation on the past. Embrace novelty, wisdom, and constant renewal, and you will find that your life becomes richer, more fulfilling, and happier each day. From the moment objections are raised and difficulties found in the proposed plan, in reality, when we find difficulties in our thoughts, we create them. Spending sleepless nights ruminating, crafting scenarios, or inventing potential problems is a force and energy poorly used to prepare the ground for these problems. In all fields of activity, we must direct our minds toward success. We must mentally visualize the accomplishment of the thing we have planned, the system or method organized, and the increasing functioning, progress, strength, and profitability of our enterprise. Spending time and energy looking back and reliving past problems or obstacles from this mental and living action is literally spending time and energy sabotaging our efforts or creating obstacles for ourselves. Forgetting what is behind and continuing to progress with what is in front is a principle that has many practical applications. Success in all endeavors depends on this principle. People who abandon old methods for new approaches achieve the greatest financial success. Those who cling to outdated methods eventually get surpassed by newer systems. If you were weakened or sick yesterday at a certain time, don't start today by focusing your thoughts on the same weakness. You must forget it. Live without thinking about it, and continue by thinking that you are strong at this moment. When you look back in your mind and relive the past, you are actually creating the conditions to have the same physical problems. Looking back in the mind and living in the past, especially regarding states of weakness, illness, or discomfort from yesterday, actually creates the conditions to experience those same states. If the first day of trial doesn't bring the desired result, try again the next day. The result you're looking for will come with time. The proverb, "Live according to what is behind," has countless applications that are intensely practical. It is impossible to challenge the irrationality of dressing or living differently from the established norm without suffering unpleasant, even harmful reactions. When many people send thoughts of prejudice, aversion, or ridicule to someone who strays from established customs, especially when it doesn't disturb anyone's peace or comfort, it represents a mental and rational tyranny. It is necessary to live away from the past and keep moving forward with what is ahead of us, for life is a constant progression. If we are progressing, it is better to always look forward. A powerful, eternal, and unmatched force pushes us all forward, but many stop and look back, unconsciously opposing this force. By doing so, they attract evil, pain, illness, and distress. Whatever the mind focuses on, or whatever stays most often in view, is what it attracts. Our thoughts and imagination continue to attract the same things until they take form and substance in the material world. I often repeat this statement because this fact is the cornerstone of your happiness or misery, your health and permanent prosperity, or even your poverty. Keep it in mind as much as possible. Our thoughts are the invisible magnet that always attracts their equivalent in the material world. By becoming aware of this, we will be more cautious about the direction of our thoughts. We will increasingly be attentive to think about joy and success rather than misery and failure. It is wonderful that the happiness or misery of our lives depends on what seems to be such a simple law and method. But the things we call simple in nature often become unfathomable mysteries when examined deeply. What concerns us the most is knowing a cause or agency that will produce a determined result. When we realize that we can think, and we do so, regarding our health, wealth, and position, we also realize that we have found within ourselves a priceless pearl. We hasten to tell our neighbor that they too can seek and find this pearl and this power within them, for no one becomes poorer by finding what can only belong to them, and all become richer and happier as each finds their pearl through the power it gives them to add to wealth and happiness in general. Life is fuller of possibilities for pleasure than was ever believed. Real life means perpetual and ever-growing maturity. It means preserving the physical body so that it can be used in this plane of existence whenever the spirit wishes. It means preserving this body not only without pain or illness, but also free from weakness and decay, what we call aging, which is actually the wear and tear of the instrument used by the spirit due to a lack of knowledge on how to always restore and regenerate it. Life means the development in us of powers and pleasures that fiction in its highest aspirations has never touched. It means a growing freshness, a growing perception and realization of all that is great, wonderful, and beautiful in the universe. It means an increasingly beautiful and wonderful discovery, a growing ability for the emotional part of our nature to feel that joy. Life is eternal in the discovery and realization of these joys. Its source is inexhaustible. Its quality and nature must remain unknown until they are revealed to us by the words of the apostolic record. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, and the heart of man has not conceived the things which God has prepared for those who love him. In ordinary things, we only obtain the smallest part of the pleasure that our lives and senses are capable of giving us. Our food is capable of providing much more pleasure to the sense of taste than it currently does. Hearing and sight do not give us all the pleasure they are capable of providing in more developed and refined bodies. Food, when ingested, should act as a healthy stimulant and give the momentum, vigor, and life that a young animal provides. The movement of each muscle, like walking, can be made to give pleasure by following the spiritual law. This mental peace, which surpasses all understanding, will reach many people in the future. The fact that it has not been realized in the past is not proof that it will not be realized. Life, whether its forces are in activity or rest, is a perpetual illusion. However, millions of our race are not at all expecting these joyful possibilities. They have mostly never heard of them and wouldn't even believe in their existence. They insist on asking whether belief in them becomes stronger over the years. Life is short, old age and decline are absolute certainties, and must occur at a certain age of the body. They believe that their powers must decrease, and that, over time, they will resemble the elderly, weak men and women they see today. Although these dark visions of the future are unpleasant to contemplate, many do not contemplate them and shut their eyes to them. However, they believe in them and fear them. If they have a belief, they must continue to believe in it. It is this constant pressure forward that makes what one believes in a material or physical reality. Foreseeing old age causes the body to age because those who envision themselves like this for years see themselves as vulnerable and in decline. What the mind projects for the future, it does for the future. They rely on a material thing, money, to protect them from harm, while all material things are utterly powerless to prevent such harm. A rich man with a worn, unhealthy body can only buy more comfortable rooms and beds for a better life than the poor man. His money does not protect him from disease and weakness. He can stimulate his appetite for the most expensive food, but in pain and distress the emperor is at the same level as the beggar. Now in all of this, the element of thought worked in ignorance in the wrong direction shows that it brings a regrettable result. Only the development of the power of the mind over the body can avoid all these ills. This power begins to be cultivated and strengthened when we recognize and believe that the mind or soul is the power that governs our bodies, and that whatever the mind thinks or imagines persistently, it now unconsciously does. We imagine in the wrong direction and think that old age or the wear of the body must be this way because it has always been. We soak up unwanted imagination and belief in sadness and physical decline, keeping these dark images in mind because we have no faith in a brighter vision. We do not look toward that vision of a continuously better life. In the New Testament, the final revelation, we find the Christian and apostolic teaching full of the feeling of life and eternal life. Death is not presented or implied as an absolute necessity, but as an enemy that must ultimately be defeated. It was never said or implied that the advent of the great revelations would only occur in millions and millions of years. The dawn of this advent may be now. It is now, not because of the writings or claims of one man, but because many consciences are now open to receive the great revelation that has knocked on humanity's door for centuries, but could not enter due to the stubbornness and deafness of those to whom it sought to awaken and benefit. The only deaths in the universe are spiritual deaths, those who have died in sin and transgression, who have not yet learned to forget, or better said, to refuse to live and depend on the relatively dead and inert element of the earth, instead of the element that comes from a higher source. However, the few who are ahead and progressing cry out because here, right under our noses, is the greatest of all driving forces. Human thought is a reality, a force that bursts forth like electricity from the mind, wounding or relieving, killing or healing, building fortunes or destroying them, working for good or evil, at every moment, day and night, asleep or awake, sculpting, shaping, and giving form to people's faces, making them ugly or pleasant. Before dedicating so much time to others, ask yourself if something must not be accomplished by you. If you can become a living power, or if you can, alongside others, demonstrate that health and physical vigor can replace old age, that any disease can be banished from the body, that wealth and material needs can result from laws and methods that are not generally practiced, and that life is not something short, unsatisfactory and hopeless, but it is now. You will not do more good to the world 100 times greater than if you dedicate your thought to feeding a few hungry mouths or relieving a few physical needs of others. Our richest men, our leaders, our famous men in art, science and war, our teachers, our ministers, our greatest successes, what is the purpose? Weakness, decay, and disease. Our most thoughtful people admit that when they have learned something about life, it is time to die. The obituary of the living is, at best, an excuse for the unsatisfactory end of a human life. Humanity demands something better. This demand, this cry, has grown and swollen for many centuries. We must always respond to this demand, and now it is being satisfied, first for a few, then for many. A new light, new knowledge, new results in human life, and all it implies are now arriving on this earth.